I'm always on the lookout for any new add-on or mod that enhances any of the old sims that I like. The program Crew Chief has been on my list a lot longer than I'd like to admit. Crew Chief specializes in, well, what it says, a virtual crew chief that you can actually talk to mid-race and help you overall understand what's going on better on the track. Popular add-on to use with Assetto Corsa Competizione or iRacing, you maybe didn't know that it also works with GTR2. But this is where reading the fine print is so important. It doesn't just work with GTR2. Crew Chief for GTR2 does all of the great things that you'd expect to add a spotter and add that virtual crew chief, but it does so much more for GTR2, and I want to show you a little bit about that. I'm set up for a 30-minute race at VLM's amazing Mid-Ohio circuit, with an assorted field of early 70s power and glory cars, driving the powerhouse Corvette C3 L88.
Flag.
Come down to the first corner for our 30-minute race here at Mid-Ohio. Got a sea of Ford Capris in front of me. Get onto the straightaway though and power away. It's gonna weave and try to hold me to the inside. There we go. Brake for the keyhole down to second gear. Corvette gets a little bit sideways. Alright, but we'll get onto this back straightaway here and really unleash the beast, as it were. 500 horsepower versus about 280 in the Capri, up to fourth gear, top gear for this car. And then hard on the brakes much earlier, down to second gear, and coming to probably a better section for the Capri and why it's qualified so much better than me. Slide the car a little bit. This is, of course, Power and Glory for GTR2, a mod I've taken a look at and I've done many races with. One of the best mods of all time for GTR2. We'll get alongside this Capri through the roller coaster here. Just tiptoeing my way on cold tires right now. And you'll hear my spotter pop in and out. So Jim is the voice, the man, if you will, that is Crew Chief, and what everybody's so familiar with. Side by side here as we'll come to the final few corners, have a better line here on the inside, down to first gear. Try not to over rev it, you can easily blow the engine in this car. Thread the needle, ooh, a little bit of contact side to side. Runs me right out to the grass, but now we're on the faster section.
Okay, Jake, come on, stay focused. Apexes and exits, apexes and exits. 10th position.
And that's what Crew Chief's all about. Somebody to encourage you, somebody to tell you what's going on. There's spotter modules for it that can tell you if cars are next to you. To be honest, the voice itself, although it's really cool and an amazing feature, since I do historic racing most of the time, it wasn't really the first thing that I'm looking to install with Sims. And you can actually run Crew Chief and everything that I'm going to talk about with this video without the voice. So I've just left the Crew Chief on because it's really cool, actually, and one of the cool features with it. But not only did they implement Crew Chief for GTR2, the second gear here, see how much I close on these guys on the straightaway. They didn't just implement the voice.
The temperature's increasing. It's now 78 Fahrenheit.
As cool as it is, they've done really a passion project with GTR2. One of the developers or somebody involved with the Crew Chief community has created a whole suite of patches and plugins and add-ons that all come as a part of the Crew Chief package that enhance the sim so much. Now, the main goal of the package, it seems, is just to improve immersion and also implement VR into GTR2. And so if you like VR, or if you do VR, Crew Chief is your answer to being able to run GTR2 with VR. And a lot of the features have a little bit of a eye towards making them better for VR, but so much more than that's been implemented. I'll try my best not to talk over Jim here as he gives me crucial
137.8 E9. You've just done a 137.8.
Crucial race details. We'll come through turn one though. It's interesting how this track really evens out these two cars, where the Corvette's really a lot faster of a car in a straight line, but not through the curvy stuff. So the patch itself all comes as a part of Crew Chief, and you just have to install Crew Chief, select GTR2, it'll ask you to install the additional module. very easy installation, and there's an INI file that gets generated where you can turn on and off these different features. And I'll go through some of the features itself, but the list is so extensive that it's actually probably longer than this 30-minute race is going to be. Ugh, make some contact there. He moved over into me. Avoid scratching up my nice Stingray here. I always kind of preferred this body style. I think I might like the earlier one a bit more, but this one's just so extreme looking that it was always very eye-catching on the road. Try not to slide the car too much to heat up the tires, and then they get really hard to control. So let's talk about some of the features though. So they've gone ahead and implemented some actual feature physics changes into the sim. One of the big ones is the ability to flat spot tires, believe it or not. So if you go into a corner and you lock up the tires, and I'm going to hopefully not demonstrate during this video, but you can develop flat spots on them. Once you develop a flat spot, if you go into the corners hard again, braking hard again, you can more easily lock up the tire. If you've only done a little bit of a flat spot, you can actually run some laps and get it to go away. The force feedback starts knocking the wheel side to side, and it becomes really hard to drive. It's something that's tunable as well, so you can make it easier or harder to get a flat spot. I'd imagine on some of the older, harder tires of the 60s and earlier cars, it'd be pretty hard to get a good flat spot, but on some of the soft slicks and softer tires of the 70s and more recent, it'd be quite easy to get good flat spots. Here we go. Gonna have a nice run down the straightaway here, over rev a little bit.
Well done, Jake. Great move. Keep it up.
Come down to the hard braking zone. Words of encouragement from Jim there. Down to second gear. They've also made it possible to pick up dirt and debris and things onto the tires, which makes them have less grip. So if you run into the grass, run into the dirt, your tires won't be perfect when you jump back on the track. A lot of sims these days have that feature, but GTR2 never did natively, so they added that in as well. So those are a couple cool physics changes that really enhance the sim, changes how you drive. The flat spot one is absolutely no joke. But perhaps the feature that sold this whole thing to me more than any other, maybe it's not the most important feature included, but is sure a welcome one, is an anti-flicker update for the graphics engine.
The track temperature is increasing. It's now 82 Fahrenheit.
Hotter track's going to make this car
137.
harder to drive.
The slap for Muir, 136.5.
Anybody familiar with some of the older ISI games is going to understand the flickering problem the graphics have. It just has an issue with R Factor, the GTR games, the race games, where textures that are close to each other flicker back and forth. You'll see it on trees and billboards and things. And you may notice that there is no flickering happening here because Crew Chief and the patch that was added to this reduces that flicker to almost nothing. Once in a while you'll see something that may flicker a little bit, but it's greatly reduced. It also extends to things like headlights, where a lot of tracks had issues with headlights flickering. There's actually something in my 24-hour Le Mans video I did where going into the Mulsanne corner, the headlights actually flickered every lap. That's completely gone with this. A lot of the hedges and things on that track flickered as well. Wish I knew about this patch and what it did before I did that video, but it just enhances the sim, really breaks any of those moments that would take you out of it because of the flickering graphics.
All right, Jake, gaining on the car.
This is the Virtua LM, Virtua Le Mans VLM Group's Mid-Ohio. Came out in 2008, which is unreal to believe. If you think about the original iRacing tracks, if you were around then or if you've seen screenshots of them, this looks so much nicer than that. And I think it actually looks quite nice still, much better than even the stock GTR2 tracks. It was made for R Factor originally by that group and ported by that group to a lot of other sims.
P6.
All right, P6 now.
Pretty hot now.
Watch the front brakes. And if you've raced the iRacing version of Mid-Ohio, which is laser scanned, you'll obviously see some differences here. It's not exactly like the real life one, but it's really, really good, really close and very enjoyable. A lot of road detail and things. Impressive what they could do just with photographs and video to make a track like this. So highly encourage any of the VLM tracks if you're doing GTR2 Power and Glory. It's not exactly a historical track, but it fits. Mid-Ohio, I think, has got that vibe to it, as most American tracks do, where they feel a little more retro. So it's a ton of fun to slide cars around, as you can hopefully see. And hopefully you can notice in the video that the gameplay itself is quite smooth. Although I'm only running, I think, 35 cars around this track. The Crew Chief patch includes some multi-threading support. And there's a few other ways to get GTR2 to multi-thread using external applications, like process managers and things, but it's built into the patch where you can tell it to utilize your CPU better. The GTR2 came out when CPUs were almost all single core, so the ability to spread out some of the workload across different cores just really smooths out the sim, and you can tell 100% if you go try to race 60 cars at Spa.
136.3.
Yeah, breaking away from me a little bit.
Just posted at 135.3.
There we go, come across the line. See if I can close up that gap by 3 seconds a little bit. But if you race 60 cars at Spa or 100 cars at places like the Nordschleife, which you can do in GTR2, it's so much smoother with this patch. It makes it very playable.
The gap behind is now 2.4.
It's something you can really only do in older sims like this is race that many AI. So that is definitely a welcome enhancement. You don't have to worry about any other applications, and for a lot of folks, I know they probably didn't even know about setting up multi-threading, so the fact that it's included is quite nice.
Hit all your apexes. Wait for the chances to come, mate. 20 minutes remaining. You've got 20 minutes left.
20 minutes.
Brake temps are good.
You can see on the screen I've got a little bit of UI in the bottom right. And that's actually a Simhub overlay, which is something else that the Crew Chief plugin is going to let you have. There's Simhub overlays, which for a lot of folks I know, they're very much enjoyed in modern sims. And I'm not sure if every feature for Simhub is supported in GTR2. I think some of the telemetry might be a little less sophisticated, but this UI was something on Race Department and works just fine, and I like it a lot more than the stock UI. A lot less on the screen, just going to give me the race time and my lap times, and you can customize everything in Simhub, so that might be another reason to add this. Sliding out real wide there.
That's this lap for Muir, 134.5.
I'm not going to be able to do 134s in this car. I think I might have lost some time on that lap.
In sector 2.
Alright, we're going to be watching the mirrors. Now that the tires are fully up to temperature.
Sector 2.
Notice my hands on the steering wheel are moving quite a bit. One of the limitations with GTR2 by default is that the in-game steering wheel only moves about 240 degrees. And so if you set your wheel to higher rotation than that, which is supported, I have mine at 540 degrees right now, you'll see that the wheel in your real hands will move, quite a bit, but the in-sim wheel will not. It scales to that 240 degrees. Well, the patch itself changes that. I think specifically for VR, Crew Chief allows you to set up more wheel rotation.
3.1 seconds.
So what you're seeing on the screen is what my actual wheel in my hand is doing up to a point. I think it stops moving when I go past the 240 degree rotation, but at least it lines up, so it gives you a much better impression of what's going on. I only run with the wheel on the screen when I'm making videos, but I think it adds a lot so that you can see exactly the inputs, and now that it's lined up with mine, it just looks a whole lot better. And I can imagine it being very disorienting in VR if you're running with the wheel and it doesn't line up with your real one, so it's a nice feature to have.
That's your best lap in the session.
Alright, best lap, but I still lost a bunch of time, so it looks like we might be in a bit of a hole here, but at least it'll let me explain the rest of these features, or we may catch a couple lapped cars. We've got some slower Alfa Romeos, GTAs and things towards the back, so may just catch them towards the end. Down a second gear here, trying not to run too deep. So I'm using H pattern and clutch,
Okay,
which is
Jake,
something
halfway home. Fuel looks good.
halfway, something that's supported by GTR2, by default is using an H pattern, but with the crew chief patch, they've actually implemented some synchronization delays, so you actually have to have the clutch pressed in for the right amount of time, like you would in a real car. They've also implemented better sequential gearing controls, which I know can be a bit finicky in GTR2 as well. So some changes there. All of these things customizable. Turn them off, turn them on. There's a lot of different settings to adjust.
The gap behind is now 2.3.
All to make it behave just like you want. They've added some features to control how the pit lane works. By default, in GTR2, your pit lane speed limiter always comes on when you enter the pit lane, but for this you can make that never happen. You can make that always happen. You can adjust what happens if you break the pit lane speed limit, if there's penalties or not, which is quite cool. All stuff to add some immersion. You can see some dirt building up on the windscreen, which I believe is also added with this patch, which must look great in VR. They've updated some of the rain effects as well, which we're not going to see during this race today. We're closed in a little bit on the car in front, so we'll just stick on it. Run a bit deep into turn one, just pick up the throttle, help rotate the car. Look at my mirror, got side by side with this Capri. I'll drag him though down to the keyhole. I have to brake a lot earlier as well, so I'm just staring at my mirror at them lunging at me. Get the car braking out. But rain effects, yeah, have been improved as well. Shadows have been improved. It's non-flickering or less flickering with those, like with the rest of the scenery.
Left front.
Wearing tires in such a short race, you'd have to replace tires.
Left. Okay, Jake, there'll be chances here. Let's make sure we can take them.
All right, so 15 minutes, halfway now. I don't know why he announced halfway earlier. I think they've added backfire animations to cars. I know they've implemented as well as wipers, which is something I've seen in some of the other patches that are around, and I think they do require you to install some additional mods to use. But, if it's raining, by default, GTR2 doesn't actually have rain wipers on the screen, windshield wipers. So, stuff like that's all just adds to the immersion. Gap is this time by 4.3, so hold out again. Running a bit deep into some of the corners. Don't have quite as much grip as I did on the early laps. Hold out a bit on the car behind. We'll see how things progress. Now I'm running this in ultra-wide resolution, which you should see in the video as well, 21:9, which looks quite nice. The screen I have, 34-inch, meant for that. One of the problems with GTR2 generally is that it actually squeezes or stretches the UI and all the menus out to be that full width, which they're not designed to be in an ultra-wide resolution, so everything's stretched out. But with the patch, you're actually able to specify a squeeze percentage on the UI itself, which I think is mainly intended, again, for VR, so that if you're using VR, things don't look all out of whack. But really helps on the ultra-wide monitors, or if you had triple screens and you wanted to use GTR, previously the UI just would have been stretched across all the screens when you're in the menus, but now you can make it just be on your center screen.
Incident in Sector 1. Sector 1 is yellow.
Which is quite nice. We got a crash, maybe. See if we see anything as we come to it. Watching my mirrors again. And a first gear. Started off promising, gaining a bunch of spots, but now as we're getting into the race, we're side by side, he just drives by me. Over-revving the car quite a bit.
Oh, no, Jake. Come on, mate, defend your position. P7. You're better than this. The car's better than this. Get it together, man. Bring back Sector 1.
Quite brutal. I don't think I've gotten past too much yet while using him. I guess it encourages you to push on. There's also a few other features that, wouldn't be things that I would necessarily use, but they have implemented features for DRS So if you're running modern Formula cars or any other car that would have DRS, it's something you would be able to utilize.
Front is now 0.8.
So it's a lot of amazing features. I think for myself, the flickering graphic fix, the ability to have the processor load spread out just by default, and the ability to use things like Simhub for better UI, show different information on the screen that you'd want to see, I think are all really amazing updates.
Behind is increasing. It's now 2.3 seconds.
To make it totally worth it to install Crew Chief. You know, I may not run with the voice on very often, although it's really entertaining, and especially for a race like this, you could almost think it's a historic meetup or something. It's quite fitting, adds a lot to an offline sim.
Left side tyres are carrying minor wear. Yellow flag in sector 1.
It tells you a lot of stuff that you just wouldn't know, even if you had good telemetry and stuff on the screen. It would be hard to monitor all those things, so lets you maybe disconnect a bit from all the informational displays and have somebody just tell you that information. You can, of course, use Crew Chief to talk to the spotter too and accept voice commands to control your pit stops and ask for certain information. It's very, very configurable if you look at the menus. We've got a yellow flag. I see some slower cars. I saw a few alphas in the pits last time by, which very earlier, not really needed the pit stop here. Whatever it was cleaned up, so that Capri just shot right by me. This is one of the nice things about real mixed class racing, though, or real GT racing without BOP. You know, this Corvette would absolutely murder all of these other cars at something like a Sebring or any high-speed track, Daytona, which this car actually won. I believe this exact paint scheme and everything won Daytona in 1970 for GT.
10 minutes remaining, 10 minutes.
But around a track like this, it's just obviously not as well suited for it. And it would make quite an interesting duel over a full championship. Just kind of mitigating your losses at tracks like this. Got another Capri coming up the inside of me, I can hear him. Second gear here. There are some force feedback updates as well. I don't think I mentioned that. So I believe specifically while you're stationary, they figured out how to add some wheel friction and things just to make it feel a little bit better. Force feedback, I think, in GTR2 is quite good to begin with some of the modern settings and everything. So it's just made the sim a lot better. Some of the things that were just getting a bit old with it are all cleaned up because of this patch, and it makes it a really fun offline sim. Because you do have all the great features that GTR2 has. I totally missed the entry there. Oh, he's going to slip by me. I should be able to get him back on the straightaway. Box him in with this Alpha. Fourth gear, sneak up the inside of the Alpha. A second, try not to run too deep here. Lock up the tires, get a flat spot. But GTR2 is one of the best offline sims of all time, with all the features to do driver swaps and changing weather, and the AI, they do have their flaws, specifically with getting around lap traffic, but otherwise I think they're very good. They definitely are able to stay on the track and race you quite hard, as you can see here. I'm just getting hounded by this Capri. He's going to shoot up the inside of me here. Whoa, I was able to out-drag him. Yeah, I can tell. I think everything in the car is hot at this point, just sliding it around. So anything that modernizes the sim a bit is just very much welcome.
Well done, mate. Good
and it's over. I guess we hit the number of laps allowed and not the time limit. That probably saved me a few positions here. Still quite a lot of fun. I guess that's why you should know whether or not your race is both time and laps limited. Fun either way. So Crew Chief with GTR2 and Power and Glory, or however you play GTR2, I think is almost a required add-on, at least in my book. The amount of features that it adds overall is extremely impressive, and some really enjoyable things as well that improve the sim so much. You know, whether or not you like the voice itself and somebody talking to you, I think is up to personal preference. I think it could add a lot of just depth to racing offline, but even without that, if you turn that off, you actually don't even need to start up Crew Chief if you want to take advantage of the other features, things like the anti-flickering for graphics and the additional force feedback settings, the multi-threading support to make the sim run smoother overall, flat spots and dirty tires, a lot of things that add to the sim, make you drive a bit different, make it a more enjoyable experience, and bring it up to date quite a lot. So I'm sure there's a few more of you out there that thought of Crew Chief just as the spotter app and didn't know that for GTR2 did all of these extra things as well. Hope you enjoyed this struggling with the Corvette around this beautiful version of Mid-Ohio. I think I'm going to take it to somewhere like Sebring and really show all the competitors who's boss. But that's it for now. Thank you for watching. This is GP Laps, and I'll see you all again next time.